I need to tell someone what happened at Riverside Industrial Complex. 7 nights. That's all it took to break me. I've been a security guard for 11 years, worked everywhere from shopping malls to pharmaceutical warehouses. Nothing prepared me for those 7 shifts. The job posting seemed straightforward enough. Night security position at a decommissioned factory on the east side of town. 12-hour shifts, 9 at night until 9 in the morning. The pay was almost double what I made at my previous position. When I asked the hiring manager why the compensation was so generous, he gave me a thin smile and said they had trouble keeping people long-term. I should have pressed him on that. I should have walked away right then. My first shift started on a Monday in late October. The Riverside Complex sprawled across 4 acres, a maze of brick buildings connected by covered walkways and loading docks. Most of the structures dated back to the 1940s, built during the war effort. The main security office sat in the central building, a cramped room with outdated monitors showing feeds from 23 cameras scattered throughout the property. Frank was the guard I was replacing. He looked exhausted, deep shadows under his eyes, his uniform hanging loose like he'd recently lost weight. During our handoff, he rushed through the basics: how to log the hourly patrols, which doors to check, where the breaker boxes were located. He kept glancing at his watch every few minutes. I asked him why he was leaving. He stopped mid-sentence, his hand frozen on the doorknob. For a long moment, he just stared at me with this hollow expression. Then he said something I didn't understand at the time. He said to always trust what I hear, not what I see. Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone, practically running to his car in the parking lot. The first few hours passed uneventfully. I familiarized myself with the camera system, tested the radio, made my initial rounds through the buildings. The complex was mostly empty, cleared out years ago when the manufacturing operation moved overseas. A few storage areas still held old equipment covered in dust and cobwebs. The hallways smelled like rust and stale air. Around midnight, I noticed something odd about camera 7. The feed showed the north loading dock, a concrete platform with 3 rolling doors. Every few minutes, the image would flicker, just for a second. Not like static or a bad connection. The picture would remain clear, but something about it seemed off, like I was seeing 2 slightly different versions of the same scene overlapping. I made a note to check the camera during my next patrol. At 1 in the morning, I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the north end of the complex. The building that housed the loading dock was the oldest on the property. 3 stories of weathered brick with most of the windows boarded up. The door to the loading area creaked as I pushed it open. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating support pillars and empty pallets stacked against the walls. Everything looked normal. I walked over to where camera 7 was mounted, inspected the housing. No obvious damage or loose wiring. That's when I heard the sound. A low scraping noise, like something heavy being dragged across concrete. It came from somewhere deeper in the building, beyond the loading dock. I called out, announced I was security. The scraping stopped immediately. Protocol said I should radio for backup before investigating potential intruders. But my radio was back in the security office, sitting on the charger. Stupid mistake. I'd worked solo for so long I'd gotten careless about carrying it. I moved toward the doorway that led into the main factory floor. The darkness there seemed thicker somehow, my flashlight barely penetrating more than 15 feet ahead. The scraping sound started again, closer now. I could hear the rhythm of it, 3 short drags followed by a pause, then 3 more. My hand found the light switch on the wall. I flipped it up. Nothing happened. I tried again, clicking it several times. Dead. The building's power had been shut off months ago according to my briefing, but Frank had specifically said the main floor still had working lights for security purposes. The scraping stopped again. In the silence that followed, I heard something else. Breathing. Heavy, labored breaths that echoed off the concrete walls. But the acoustics made it impossible to determine the direction. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. I backed toward the loading dock exit. My flashlight flickered once, the beam dimming for just a moment before returning to full brightness. In that brief instant of reduced light, I saw something at the edge of the darkness. A shape. Tall. It moved wrong, its motion jerky and unnatural, like old film footage skipping frames. My rational mind said homeless person, maybe someone high on drugs seeking shelter. But every instinct I'd developed over 11 years of security work was screaming at me to run. I've confronted shoplifters, broken up fights, chased down trespassers. I'd never felt fear like what gripped me in that moment. I turned and walked quickly back through the loading dock, fighting the urge to break into a sprint. The heavy breathing followed me, growing louder. I could feel the presence behind me, could sense it getting closer even though I heard no footsteps, just that awful breathing and the occasional scraping sound. I reached the exterior door and pushed through, nearly stumbling down the concrete steps. The cold October air hit my face as I moved across the empty lot back toward the central building. I didn't look behind me, couldn't bring myself to turn around. Back in the security office, I locked the door and checked the monitors. Camera 7 showed the north loading dock, completely empty. I rewound the feed, watched the playback from the last 20 minutes. On the screen, I saw myself enter the building, inspect the camera, walk toward the interior doorway. Then I saw myself back up and leave. But the footage showed nothing else. No shapes in the darkness, no indication of any other presence. Just me, alone in an empty building, acting afraid of nothing. I spent the rest of the shift in that office, watching the monitors, jumping at every small noise. When dawn finally broke and my replacement arrived, a woman named Sarah who worked the day shift, I gave her a brief report. Said everything was quiet, just routine checks. I didn't mention what happened at the north loading dock, partly because I wasn't sure what to say, partly because the camera footage made me doubt my own experience. I drove home as the sun came up, exhausted but too wired to sleep. I kept thinking about Frank's advice. Trust what you hear, not what you see. At the time, I thought he'd gotten it backwards. Now I wasn't so sure. The second shift was Tuesday night. I told myself the previous evening had been first night jitters, my imagination working overtime in an unfamiliar environment. I'd worked hundreds of nights in empty buildings. This was no different. I arrived at 8:45, parked in my usual spot near the central building. Sarah was finishing her paperwork when I walked in. She seemed relieved to see me, mentioned that she'd heard strange sounds coming from the north end during her shift. Mechanical noises, like old machinery running. But when she went to investigate, everything was silent and still. After she left, I settled into the routine, checked the cameras, tested the equipment, began my first patrol. I deliberately saved the north building for last, working my way through the other structures first. Everything seemed normal. Old buildings make noise, things settle, pipes expand and contract. I knew this. At 11:30, I stood outside the door to the north loading dock. My flashlight felt heavy in my hand. I had my radio this time, clipped to my belt and fully charged. I could call Sarah if anything happened, though she lived 30 minutes away. Local police response time was probably similar. I opened the door. The loading dock looked exactly as it had the previous night. I moved through quickly, checked the camera, confirmed the power switches were all in the off position. Then I turned toward the interior doorway. The darkness beyond seemed to pulse, almost alive. I stood there for several seconds, listening. Nothing. No scraping, no breathing. Just the faint sound of wind outside and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I stepped through the doorway onto the factory floor. My flashlight beam swept across rows of silent machinery, old assembly line equipment frozen in place like mechanical fossils. The space was vast, easily the size of a football field, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadow 20 feet above. Something crunched under my boot. I looked down. Broken glass, scattered across the concrete in a rough circle. I crouched down, examined it more closely. Not regular glass. Thicker, like the material used for industrial lighting fixtures. But all the overhead lights in this building had been removed or broken years ago, according to the property assessment. The temperature dropped. Not gradually, but all at once, like someone had opened a freezer door. My breath came out in visible clouds. The cold bit through my jacket, made my fingers ache where they gripped the flashlight. Then I heard it. That scraping sound again. 3 short drags, a pause, 3 more. But this time it was accompanied by something else. A voice. Faint, distorted, like words spoken through water. I couldn't make out what it was saying. I stood up slowly, aimed my flashlight toward the sound. The beam illuminated more machinery, more empty space. Nothing moving, nothing there. But the voice continued, growing slightly louder. It had a pleading quality now, urgent and desperate. My radio crackled with static. I grabbed it, pressed the talk button. Before I could speak, a voice came through the speaker. My voice. I heard myself saying, "Help me, please. Someone help me." But I wasn't talking. The radio was somehow playing back my own voice, words I had never spoken. The flashlight flickered again. In the stuttering light, I saw them. Dozens of shapes standing motionless throughout the factory floor, scattered among the machinery. Tall, impossibly thin figures with limbs bent at wrong angles. They weren't moving, just standing there in perfect silence. When the light stabilized, they were gone. Empty space where the figures had been. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight steady. The scraping sound erupted all around me, coming from every direction at once. Loud, violent, like metal being torn apart. I ran. Didn't think, didn't look back, just ran toward the loading dock exit as fast as I could move. The sound followed, along with that distorted voice and the awful cold that seemed to seep into my bones. I made it back to the security office, slammed the door, threw the deadbolt. My hands were numb. I turned up the space heater in the corner, held my fingers near the element until feeling returned in painful tingles. The monitors showed nothing unusual. Camera 7 displayed an empty loading dock and factory floor. I checked the timestamp, confirmed I had just been there minutes ago. The footage showed me entering, moving around, then running out. No shapes, no figures, just me, alone and terrified of empty air. I spent the rest of that shift in the security office, watching the monitors with obsessive focus. Every camera angle, every shadow, every flicker of movement. The north building remained dark and still on camera 7. Whatever I'd experienced left no trace on the digital recording. When Sarah arrived Wednesday morning, I almost told her everything. Almost. But the words wouldn't come. How do you explain seeing things that cameras can't record? Hearing voices that shouldn't exist? She'd think I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. She mentioned the noises again, said she'd heard them every night this week, always from the north building. Always mechanical sounds that stopped the moment she went to investigate. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes. She asked if I'd noticed anything strange during my shifts. I lied, told her everything was quiet. She studied my face for a moment, seemed about to say something, then just nodded and left. I watched her car pull away, then drove home with the windows down despite the cold, needing the fresh air to feel real and present. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those figures standing motionless in the darkness, their limbs bent at impossible angles. I heard that scraping sound, that desperate voice calling for help in my own distorted tone. By Wednesday evening, I'd convinced myself not to go back. I could quit, find another job, pretend this place didn't exist. But Frank's words kept echoing in my mind. Trust what you hear. And I'd heard genuine fear in Sarah's voice when she talked about those mechanical noises. Whatever was happening in that building, I wasn't the only one experiencing it. I arrived for my third shift with a plan. I'd brought a camera of my own, a decent digital recorder I used for documenting property damage assessments. If the security cameras couldn't capture what was happening, maybe independent equipment would. I also brought a thermal scanner, the kind used to detect temperature fluctuations in walls, and I downloaded an audio recording app on my phone. Sarah was already gone when I arrived. She'd left a note on the desk. 3 words: be careful tonight. The first patrol went smoothly. I documented everything with my camera. Took photos of empty hallways and silent rooms. The thermal scanner showed normal temperature readings throughout the complex. Nothing unusual. Nothing threatening. At 10:15, I returned to the security office and reviewed the footage. Regular photos of regular spaces. I felt simultaneously relieved and foolish. Expensive equipment to document absolutely nothing. But then I noticed something in one of the photos. A shot I'd taken of the west corridor in the central building. In the far background, barely visible, was a door I didn't remember seeing during the patrol. The photo showed it clearly. A gray metal door with a small window of reinforced glass. But I'd walked that exact corridor, and I had no memory of that door. I checked the building's floor plan, pinned to the wall above the desk. The west corridor showed 4 doors leading to storage rooms and a maintenance closet. No 5th door. No gray metal door with a reinforced window. I grabbed my flashlight and camera, headed back to the west corridor. Walked it slowly, checking every detail. 4 doors, exactly as shown on the floor plan. No 5th door. Enhanced text with emotional tags. The wall where the door appeared in the photo was solid concrete, painted industrial beige, unbroken. I took another photo of that section of wall, reviewed it immediately on the camera's display screen. The gray door was there again, clearly visible. But when I looked up from the screen, I saw only solid wall. My radio crackled. A voice came through, female, distorted with static. North building, Section C, come to Section C. It wasn't Sarah's voice. Too deep, too strange. I pressed the talk button. Who is this? Identify yourself. Only static answered. Then the voice again, more insistent. Section C, they're waiting. You need to see. I should have ignored it. Should have stayed in the office, called the police, reported an intruder. Instead, I found myself walking toward the north building, camera in one hand, flashlight in the other, thermal scanner tucked in my jacket pocket. The loading dock was silent when I entered. I checked the camera, confirmed it was still recording. Then I moved through to the factory floor, every sense alert for danger. The temperature dropped immediately. My breath clouded. The thermal scanner went crazy, showing massive cold spots throughout the space, shifting and moving like living things. I photographed everything, trying to capture what my eyes couldn't trust. The scraping sound started. 3 short drags, pause, 3 more. But this time I followed it, moving deeper into the factory floor, winding between old machinery and assembly line equipment. The sound led me to the far corner, an area labeled Section C on the faded signage. A large industrial furnace stood there, its metal door hanging open. The interior was dark, but my flashlight revealed something inside. Papers. Dozens of them, scattered across the furnace floor. I knelt down, reached in carefully, pulled out a handful. Personnel records. Employee files from the factory's operational period. I flipped through them, reading names and dates. Most were routine, unremarkable. But several had red stamps across the front. Section C, Incident Report attached. I pulled out my phone, used its flashlight to read the attached incident reports. The first one was dated March 1987. An employee named Robert Chen had disappeared during a night shift. Last seen entering the north building to perform maintenance on Section C equipment. No trace found despite extensive search. The second report, August 1989. Catherine Miller, maintenance worker, disappeared during night shift. Last seen near Section C. 5 more reports, all night shift workers. All disappeared between 1987 and 1991. All last seen near or in Section C. The final report was dated October 1991, just 2 months before the factory closed permanently. The last report was different, longer, more detailed. It described sounds heard by multiple employees, mechanical scraping, voices calling for help, cold spots, workers refusing to enter the north building, production managers dismissing concerns as superstition. Then, the final disappearance. A night security guard named Frank Morrison. My blood went cold. Frank, the man who'd trained me, who'd worked here 50 years ago, who'd told me to trust what I hear. The scraping sound surrounded me, deafening now. The temperature plummeted until frost formed on the metal surfaces around me. My camera fell from my numb fingers, clattered across the concrete. When I looked up, they were there. 7 figures, tall and impossibly thin, standing in a circle around me. Their faces were wrong, features stretched and distorted like reflections in warped mirrors. They wore the remnants of work clothes, faded uniforms with name tags I couldn't read in the stuttering light. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, surrounding me. And I understood with absolute certainty that they were the missing workers, the ones who disappeared decades ago, still here, still trapped in this section of the factory floor. One of them raised an arm, pointed toward the furnace. The gesture was slow, deliberate. In the fractured light, I saw something I'd missed before. Scratches on the furnace's interior walls, deep gouges in the metal, words carved by desperate fingers. "Help us. Let us out. Please." My phone rang. The sound was impossibly loud in the cold silence. I fumbled it. From my pocket, looked at the screen. The caller ID showed my own number. I was calling myself. I answered. Heard breathing on the other end. Then my own voice, distant and hollow. "Run. Don't come back." They're trying to add you to Section C. The line went dead. The figures stepped closer, tightening the circle. The cold intensified until I couldn't feel my hands or feet. The scraping sound became words, 7 voices speaking in unison. Join us. Stay. Help us. Join us. I broke through the circle, ran with everything I had. Behind me, the voices rose to a shriek. The temperature dropped so severely I thought my lungs would freeze. I didn't look back, didn't stop, just ran through the loading dock and out into the night. I made it to my car, drove away from the complex without checking out, without grabbing my equipment from the security office, without looking in the rearview mirror. When I got home, I checked my camera. The memory card was blank. Every photo I'd taken that night had been erased. The thermal scanner's data was gone. My phone showed no record of any call. The personnel files were real, though. I'd shoved them in my jacket pocket without thinking. 7 reports, 7 disappearances, 7 figures in Section C. I called in sick Thursday and Friday. Sarah left concerned voicemails I didn't return. On Saturday, the property management company called. They'd found a replacement guard. My services were no longer needed. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt guilty. Because Sarah was still working there, still doing her shifts alone in that complex with whatever haunted Section C. I called her Sunday afternoon. She didn't answer. I tried again Monday morning. Nothing. By Monday evening, I was standing in the parking lot of the industrial complex, every instinct screaming at me to leave. Her car was there, a silver Honda with the yoga studio bumper sticker. She'd come to work. But the security office was dark, empty, no sign of her anywhere. I should have walked away. I should have called the police. Instead, I used the key code she'd given me weeks ago, entered the complex, and went looking for Sarah. The difference was immediate. The buildings felt emptier somehow, more hollow. The emergency lights that had always hummed steadily now flickered erratically. The air tasted metallic, wrong. I found her equipment in the security office. Her phone lay on the desk, screen cracked. Her jacket hung on the chair. The logbook was open to her last entry, written in shaky handwriting that didn't look like hers. 3:15 a.m., North Building, Section C. Heard voices calling for help, going to investigate. That was 4 hours ago. Dawn was breaking outside, pale, light filtering through dirty windows. I grabbed a flashlight and headed for the North Building. The door was propped open with a brick, something Sarah would never do. Inside, the cold hit me like a physical force. Frost covered everything, thick layers of ice coating machinery and walls, despite the warming temperature outside. "Sarah?" My voice echoed strangely, the sound bending and twisting. Movement in the shadows. I turned, caught a glimpse of someone darting between equipment. "Sarah, is that you?" I followed, moving deeper into Section C. The scraping sound was constant now, coming from everywhere and nowhere. The temperature continued to drop until I could barely feel my extremities. I found her near the furnace. She was standing perfectly still, facing the open door, frost forming on her clothing and hair. Her eyes were open but empty, staring at something inside the furnace I couldn't see. "Sarah!" I grabbed her shoulder, tried to turn her toward me. Her skin was ice cold, frozen solid. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't respond. Then she spoke, but it wasn't her voice. It was 7 voices layered together, speaking through her mouth in perfect unison. She came when we called. She wanted to help. Now she understands. Now she stays. I pulled harder, tried to drag her away from the furnace. She didn't budge, rooted to the spot like she weighed 1,000 pounds. The voices continued speaking through her, relentless. You came back. You felt guilty. You wanted to save her. Noble, foolish. Now you stay too. The 7 figures materialized around us, closer than before. Close enough that I could see their faces clearly in the growing dawn light filtering through the windows. Hollow eyes, slack mouths, skin stretched too tight over elongated bones. They reached for me with impossibly long fingers. The cold intensified until frost formed on my eyelashes. I could feel my thoughts slowing, my body growing heavy. So easy to just stop fighting. So easy to stay, to join them in Section C. Sarah's hand moved, jerky and unnatural. She reached into her jacket pocket, pulled something out, her taser. Her fingers found mine, pressed the device into my palm. For just a second, her eyes focused, met mine, pleaded. I understood. I jammed the taser against the nearest figure and pulled the trigger. The electric discharge lit up the entire space. The figures shrieked, an inhuman sound that vibrated through my skull. The cold shattered like glass. Sarah collapsed, suddenly freed from whatever held her. I grabbed her, threw her over my shoulder, and ran. Behind us, the screaming intensified. The entire building groaned, metal twisting and concrete cracking. I burst through the loading dock door as something massive gave way inside, the sound of collapse and destruction echoing through the complex. I made it to my car, shoved Sarah into the passenger seat, and drove. In the rearview mirror, I watched the north building. For just a moment, I saw 7 figures standing in the broken doorway, watching us leave. Sarah regained consciousness at the hospital. Severe hypothermia, the doctors said. No explanation for how she'd gotten so cold in late spring. She didn't remember anything after entering the north building. Didn't remember standing by the furnace or speaking with those terrible, layered voices. The industrial complex was condemned 3 days later. Structural instability, the official report claimed. The entire north building was demolished within a week. The rubble was hauled away, the land scheduled for redevelopment. I should have felt relieved, but I didn't. Because last night, my phone rang at 3:15 a.m. I answered without thinking. 7 voices spoke in unison. The building is gone, but Section C isn't about the building. Section C is about the workers, about the contract, about the debt that must be paid. Then silence. But in that silence, I heard it. The sound that still wakes me every night. 3 short scrapes. Pause. 3 more. Getting closer. Sarah stopped returning my calls a week ago. I drove past her apartment yesterday. The windows were dark. Her car hasn't moved in days. I knocked, but nobody answered. The landlord said she'd paid rent through the end of the year, insisted she wasn't to be disturbed, that she was fine. But I know better. I know exactly where she is, what she's doing. Standing somewhere in darkness, frost forming on her skin, waiting, calling, adding her voice to the 7 that already echo through Section C. And they're calling for me now. Every night at 3:15, my phone rings. Every night the voices grow louder, more insistent. I've tried blocking the number, changing my phone, moving apartments. Nothing works. Last night, I woke to find frost on my bedroom window. It formed words in ice crystals. Section C awaits. This morning, I found a name tag on my pillow. Faded blue uniform tag. It has my name printed on it. Below that, Section C, night shift. I've stopped going out after dark, stopped answering my phone, but it doesn't matter. Because I understand now what Frank tried to warn me about, what those personnel reports really documented. Section C isn't a place. It's a quota. 7 workers went missing because 7 workers were needed. The factory took them one by one over 4 years. Then it closed. The debt went unpaid. 50 years passed while Section C waited patiently for the complex to reopen, for new workers to resume the shifts, to complete what was started. Frank trained me because he was part of this, one of the original 7. He'd been trying to add more workers, to share the burden, to finally move on, and he'd succeeded with Sarah. Now they needed just one more. The scraping sound is in my apartment now. I hear it in the walls. 3 short drags. Pause. 3 more. Getting closer. Moving through the building like something searching. I thought about running, leaving the state, changing my identity. But where would I go? Section C followed them across decades, across the demolition of the entire building. Distance won't save me, so I'm recording this instead, leaving a record, a warning. If you're offered a night security position at an industrial complex, especially one that's been closed for decades, walk away. If you hear scraping sounds at 3:15 a.m., don't investigate. If someone named Frank offers you training, run. And if you ever see a job listing for Section C, understand that it's not really a job. It's a collection notice, a debt being called due. And the only payment they accept is you. The scraping is at my door now. 3 drags. Pause. 3 more. The temperature is dropping. Frost is forming on the inside of my windows. They're here. Section C has come to collect, and I'm out of time. I recorded that message 3 days ago, posted it online before I left my apartment for the last time. I don't know if anyone will believe it. I don't know if it matters, because I tried to run anyway. I packed everything I could fit in my car and drove. No destination, just away. I made it 200 miles before the engine died on a dark stretch of highway. No warning. The dashboard went black, headlights cut out. Everything stopped at exactly 3:15 a.m. I sat there in the darkness, breath fogging in air that was suddenly freezing. Then I heard it through the closed windows. 3 scrapes along the side of the car. Pause. 3 more. Circling me. I don't remember much after that. I woke up at dawn in the parking lot of the demolished industrial complex. My car was there, engine running perfectly, like nothing had happened. But I knew. Something had changed during those lost hours. I went home. What else could I do? And I waited. The calls continued. Every night at 3:15. But the voices were different now. Expectant. Patient. Like they knew they'd already won. I started researching, trying to understand what I was dealing with. I found records of the factory's construction in 1952. Before that, the land had been something else, an asylum that burned down in 1948. 73 patients died in the fire, trapped in a locked ward. Ward C. The asylum records mentioned something else, a treatment they'd been testing, experimental. They'd put 7 patients in isolation, subjected them to something the records called continuous labor therapy, forced them to work identical tasks in shifts around the clock, scraping slag off metal forms. 3 short scrapes. Pause. 3 more. Over and over until their minds broke. All 7 died before the fire. The official cause was listed as exhaustion and exposure. They'd been locked in that ward forgotten, working those repetitive motions until their bodies gave out. The factory was built right on top of where Ward C had been, and Section C of the factory floor was positioned exactly where that isolation ward had stood. They weren't just ghosts, they were something worse. Workers who'd been used up, consumed by endless labor, who died without ever being released from their task. And now they were trapped in that motion, that purpose, forever, needing others to complete the shifts they could never finish. I understood then. This wasn't about revenge or evil. It was about incompletion. A task started but never concluded. A shift that had lasted 70 years and counting. They didn't want to hurt anyone. They just needed workers, needed the shifts covered, needed someone to finally clock out so they could rest. The realization didn't make me feel better, because I knew what it meant. There was only one way this could end. Last night, I made my decision. I drove back to the demolished site at 2:45 a.m. The rubble had been cleared. Just empty concrete foundation remained, cracked and overgrown. I walked to where Section C had been. I could feel it. A cold spot in the darkness. A place where the air felt thick and wrong. At 3:15 exactly, they appeared. 7 figures emerging from nothing. But I could see them clearly now. Not shadows. People. Gaunt and worn, dressed in asylum gowns beneath factory uniforms, their fingers raw and bleeding from decades of scraping. Their faces weren't evil. They were exhausted, desperate. 7 voices spoke, but quieter now, almost pleading. The shift must be completed. The work must be finished. Please. I looked at them. These people who'd been tortured, forgotten, killed, who'd been trapped in this endless nightmare of labor for over 70 years, who'd reached out desperately through the decades, trying to find someone who could help them end it. Frank had tried to help them by adding more workers, by spreading the burden, but that wasn't the answer. More workers just meant more trapped souls. The shift didn't need to be shared. It needed to be finished. "Show me," I said. They led me down, through the cracked foundation, into spaces that shouldn't exist anymore, down to where Section C still waited. Not the physical space, the metaphysical one, the place their minds had been trapped since 1948. The furnace was there, always burning, always needing fuel. The workstations were there, 7 of them, all occupied. Frank was at one, Sarah at another. 5 others I didn't recognize. All of them working in that same mechanical motion. 3 scrapes, pause, 3 more. Their eyes were vacant, lost. "One more," the 7 original voices whispered. "One more worker, 8 total. Then the shift can end. Then we can all rest." I understood the trap. Add 1 more, complete the number, but condemn another soul to this existence. The cycle would never end. There would always need to be 1 more. 1 more. Forever. Unless someone broke it differently. I walked to one of the workstations, picked up the tool. The metal was cold and felt impossibly heavy. I could feel the weight of decades pressing down on it. 70 years of the same motion, the same task, repeated endlessly. But I didn't start scraping. Instead, I set the tool down carefully, deliberately, and I stepped back. "No," I said. "The shift is over. You don't need 1 more worker. You need permission to stop working." The furnace roared. The cold intensified. The 7 voices rose in panic and anger. "The work must be completed. The shift must continue. That is the rule. That is the contract. You've been working for 70 years, I said, louder. The shift ended decades ago. You fulfilled any contract, any debt. You've paid it 1,000 times over. You're done, all of you. The work is finished. I walked to Frank's station, put my hand on his shoulder. He was ice cold, but I didn't let go. Frank, you're done. You can clock out now. His hands faltered, stopped moving. He looked up at me with frost-covered eyes. For a moment, I saw recognition, gratitude. Then he was gone, just empty space where he'd stood. I went to each station, Sarah, the others. One by one, I released them, gave them the permission no one had ever given them, to stop, to rest, to leave. The 7 original figures watched, their forms flickering, uncertain. The furnace fire began to dim. You too, I said, turning to them. Especially you. You didn't deserve what they did to you. You don't deserve to be trapped here. The work is done. The shift is over. You can rest now. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then one of the 7 spoke alone. Not in that terrible chorus, just one voice. Human. Tired. Over? Really over? Yes, I said. You're released. All of you. Go. The furnace went dark. The cold vanished. One by one, the 7 figures faded. But before they disappeared completely, I saw their faces change. The exhaustion lifted. The pain eased. They looked peaceful, free. Then I was alone in the darkness. Not the metaphysical section C, just the regular darkness of an empty lot at 3:30 in the morning. I walked back to my car, drove home, waited. 3:15 a.m. came. My phone didn't ring. The apartment stayed warm. No scraping sounds, no voices. I checked on Sarah the next day. She answered her door looking confused but healthy. She didn't remember the past 3 weeks, didn't remember being at the complex or Section C. It was like those memories had been erased when she was released. Frank's house stood empty. I don't know what happened to him, but I hope, wherever he is, he's finally resting. The demolished site was sold last week. They're building condos. I drove past yesterday during construction. The workers found something when they dug the foundation deeper. Old asylum records, documents about Ward C, about the 7 patients who died there. The construction company gave them a proper burial. 7 coffins, 7 headstones, names restored, finally acknowledged. I haven't had any more calls, any more visits. Section C is truly gone now, not demolished or demolished. Actually gone, finished, released. I'm leaving town anyway. Some things you can't forget, even when they're over. Every time I hear a scraping sound, my heart still races. Every night at 3:15, I still wake up, just for a moment, listening for voices that don't come anymore. But I'm okay. I'm free. We all are. If you're watching this, if you're listening to my story, understand something. Sometimes the monsters aren't evil. Sometimes they're just trapped. Sometimes the horror isn't about destroying you. It's about being so broken, so lost, that you can't stop hurting others even though you don't want to. And sometimes the only way to defeat a curse isn't to run from it or fight it. It's to understand it. To give it what it really needs. Not another victim, not another worker, but permission to rest. I was a night security guard at an industrial complex. I quit after. Shift 7. Not because I was afraid, but because I'd finished the job. The real job. Not guarding the building. but releasing the workers who'd been trapped there for 70 years. My name is Marcus Webb. This is my story. This is why Section C doesn't exist anymore. And if you ever find yourself in a place that feels wrong, where the air is too cold and you hear sounds at 3:15 a.m., remember this. Sometimes the dead aren't trying to hurt you. They're just trying to tell you something, trying to ask for help. Listen to them, understand them, and if you're brave enough, help them find peace. That's how you really defeat the darkness, not by running from it, but by bringing light to it, by giving rest to the restless, by finishing what was left incomplete. Section C is closed. The shift is over. The workers have finally gone home, and I can sleep again.